The year was 1983. On August 31st, Korean Airlines Flight 007 departed from New York's JFK Airport. Its destination? Seoul, South Korea. On board were 269 souls. The Boeing 747 soared into the night sky. The flight was captained by experienced pilot Chun Byung-in. Little did they know they were flying towards a nightmare. A navigational error would seal their fate. The Cold War cast a long shadow over the world. The United States and the Soviet Union locked in an ideological battle. Both superpowers possessed vast nuclear arsenals. Espionage was rampant. Any miscalculation could have disastrous consequences. The Korean peninsula remained a flashpoint. The Soviet Union backed the North while the United States supported the South. Korean Airlines Flight 007 strayed off course. It entered Soviet airspace over the Kamchatka Peninsula. In the early 1980s, long-distance air navigation was a different beast. Sophisticated GPS systems were still in their infancy. Pilots relied on ground-based radio beacons and inertial navigation systems. KAL 007's navigation relied on an inertial navigation system. This unit used gyroscopes and accelerometers. However, it had a critical flaw. Over the Pacific Ocean, KAL 007 began to drift. The aircraft was now off course, heading towards Soviet airspace. Meanwhile, on the ground, a different drama was unfolding. Soviet radar stations detected an unidentified aircraft. Soviet interceptors were scrambled to identify the intruder. The Soviet pilots made visual contact with a Boeing 747. Attempts to communicate were met with silence. The situation was becoming increasingly dangerous. Inside the cockpit of KAL 007, the mood was one of routine and calm. The crew, unaware of their navigational error, continued to chat with air traffic controllers. Their radio signals were being picked up by Soviet listeners. The Soviets struggled to decipher the messages. The order to fire a warning shot hung in the air. Deep within a fortified bunker, Soviet commanders grappled with a decision. The unidentified aircraft, a civilian Boeing 747, showed no signs of altering course. Any intrusion into their airspace was viewed with extreme suspicion. The order came down: intercept the intruder. The pilots prepared to carry out their orders. The fate of KAL 007 was sealed. High above the frigid waters of the North Pacific, the drama continued to unfold. KAL 007, unaware of the danger, maintained its course. Soviet fighter jets flanked their aircraft. The MiGs, armed with missiles, flew in close formation. They observed the airliner closely. They saw a civilian aircraft. Orders were to force it to land or destroy it. The lead pilot fired a warning shot. Inside the cockpit of KAL 007, the first sign of trouble came as a jarring jolt. The warning shots missed the 747 by a hair's breadth. The pilots reacted instinctively. They banked the aircraft sharply. The sudden maneuvers were misinterpreted. The 747 was now a clear and present danger. The lead Soviet pilot locked on and squeezed the trigger. The missiles, guided by radar, sped towards their target at supersonic speed. Inside the Boeing 747, passengers were oblivious to the impending doom. The first missile struck the tail, detonating in a blinding flash. The explosion ripped through the rear fuselage. Screams filled the air as the plane lurched violently. The second missile hit the left wing. The impact sent the 747 into an uncontrollable spin. The aircraft, now a wreck engulfed in flames, plummeted towards the Sea of Japan. In the Soviet command bunker, a chilling silence descended as the blip representing KAL 007 vanished. The men in uniform stared in disbelief. The magnitude of their actions began to sink in. The order had been given and carried out. The intruder was neutralized. But at what cost? A civilian airliner now lay at the bottom of the Sea of Japan. As dawn broke over the Sea of Japan, a scene of unimaginable devastation unfolded. Debris from the shattered airliner, pieces of fuselage, luggage, clothing, and personal effects bobbed on the surface of the water. Rescue vessels, alerted by the lack of communication from Cal 007, rushed to the scene. The search for survivors began immediately, but hope faded with each passing hour. The frigid waters and the force of the impact left little chance of finding anyone alive. Bodies, some still strapped into their seats, were recovered from the unforgiving sea. It was a gruesome and heartbreaking task, a stark reminder of the human cost of the tragedy. The Soviet Union, initially denying any involvement, was forced to confront the truth as evidence mounted. The United States had tracked the Soviet fighters and recorded their communications. The evidence was irrefutable. The world watched in horror and outrage as the details of the tragedy emerged. The news of Cal 007's destruction sent shockwaves across the globe. It was a stark reminder of the Cold War's ever-present dangers. Newspapers around the world splashed the story across their front pages. Korean airliner shot down by Soviets, proclaimed the New York Times. The world reeled in shock, struggling to comprehend the senseless tragedy. Protests erupted in major cities, condemning the Soviet Union's actions. The United States, led by President Ronald Reagan, condemned the Soviet Union. Reagan called the incident a crime against humanity, an act of barbarism. The United Nations convened an emergency session to address the crisis. The United Nations Security Council became a focal point for the global outcry against the Soviet Union. The U.S. and its allies demanded an investigation into the downing of Cal 007. They called for the Soviet Union to be held accountable. The Soviet Union remained defiant. Their denials crumbled in the face of mounting evidence. U.S. intelligence provided irrefutable proof. The Soviets claimed Cal 007 was on a spy mission. This claim was met with widespread skepticism. Evidence showed Cal 007 was a civilian airliner. The Soviet Union's attempts to justify its actions were seen as cynical. The Security Council, divided by Cold War rivalries, took no meaningful action. The Soviet Union's veto power blocked any resolution. The world watched in frustration as the Soviet Union escaped accountability. The Security Council had become a stage for Cold War posturing and impotence. Section 3. The Iron Curtain of Silence. The Soviet Union retreated behind its Iron Curtain of secrecy. Access to the crash site was strictly controlled by the Soviet Navy. International investigators were denied access, met with stonewalling and obfuscation. The Soviet Union engaged in a campaign of misinformation and disinformation. The Soviet media parroted the official line. Cal 007, they proclaimed, was a spy plane. Soviet pilots insisted they had acted with restraint. The Soviet people were largely kept in the dark. The families of the victims were left to mourn without answers. The truth remained buried beneath the waves, along with Cal 007 and its 269 souls. The world watched in horror, its faith in international institutions shaken. The downing of Cal 007 sent shockwaves through the world of aviation. It was a stark reminder that even routine flights could become pawns in deadly games of nations. The tragedy exposed vulnerabilities in global airspace that could no longer be ignored. Calls for reform and improved international cooperation echoed across the globe. The International Civil Aviation Organization found itself thrust into the spotlight. The incident highlighted the urgent need for more robust safety measures. One significant change was the development of the Global Positioning System for civilian use. The Cal 007 incident accelerated GPS adoption for civilian aviation. GPS revolutionized air navigation, making it safer and more efficient. The legacy of CAL 007 lives on in the form of a safer sky for all. The implementation of GPS for civilian aviation was a gradual process, but its impact was profound. New aircraft were equipped with GPS receivers, while older aircraft were retrofitted with the technology. Air traffic control systems were upgraded to incorporate GPS data, providing a more accurate picture of aircraft positions. The adoption of GPS was part of a broader effort to enhance aviation safety after the KL 007 tragedy. ICAO introduced new regulations and procedures to prevent similar incidents. These included improved communication protocols and enhanced training for pilots and air traffic control personnel. Clearer rules of engagement for intercepting civilian aircraft were also established. The KL 007 tragedy highlighted the need for greater transparency and cooperation between nations. Miscommunication and mistrust could have catastrophic consequences. The aviation industry learned from the tragedy, making the skies safer for all. The changes from CAL 007's legacy, from GPS adoption to stricter safety protocols, have saved countless lives. The downing of Korean Airlines Flight 007 remains one of the Cold War's most tragic events. It serves as a chilling reminder of the human cost of superpower rivalry and the devastating consequences of mistrust. The 269 lives lost in September 1983 are a testament to the fragility of peace. The incident forced the world to confront the reality that even the skies could become a battleground. It shattered the illusion of safety in air travel, leaving an indelible mark on the global psyche. The images of the wreckage and grieving families became a haunting reminder of the human cost of political divides. Yet, from the ashes of tragedy, hope emerged. The downing of CAL 007 spurred the international community to enhance aviation safety. The widespread adoption of GPS technology and the implementation of stricter safety protocols were direct outcomes of the tragedy. The legacy of CAL 007 is one of resilience and humanity's capacity to strive for a safer world. The memory of those who perished serves as a reminder of the importance of vigilance and understanding.